and design consultant with the firm MIG. We're helping the city of Charlotte on this effort. We're going to be recording today's conversation for our reference and to post online for anyone who couldn't attend. We've got a pretty small group today, it looks like, so if anyone has any questions at any point in the presentation, feel free to raise your hand or speak up, or put your questions or comments in the chat as well. We've got a few general guidelines I'd like to show at the beginning of these virtual meetings. So you can see those on the slide here. I'll just also mention that if you're able to access the meeting through a computer that with a bigger screen, it'll be a little easier for some of our map-based activities later in the presentation than if you're on your phone. If you are on your phone, we can still get your feedback though through Zoom features. So today's objective is to have a community conversation about the draft 2040 policy map. Before we dive into today's conversation, we will provide some high-level information about the Charlotte Streets Map and the Charlotte Future 2040 Policy Map. However, a more in-depth overview of the two projects is recorded and available online on the project website. So we'll put that link in the chat for your reference. So the purpose of these two maps is to help implement the vision of Charlotte's Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which is the guiding document for our city's growth and development over the next 20 years. The comprehensive plan was adopted in June of this year, and there are now several major initiatives underway to help put the plan into action. The 2040 policy map will identify appropriate locations for future development in our neighborhoods. The streets map will define the multimodal vision for Charlotte's arterial streets to support mobility between the places we live, work, and play. And the Unified Development Ordinance will consolidate and update the city's land development and zoning regulations so future development is aligned with the vision of the comprehensive plan. The 2040 policy map and the streets map will both help implement the vision of the comprehensive plan by informing how our built environment evolves and changes over time. The built environment includes both land use and transportation related characteristics. So each map provides supporting information about the places we want to create. Again, the 2040 policy map will inform the type of development that's appropriate to occur in specific geographies throughout the community. The Charlotte Streets map will define future cross sections for arterials, including the future curb line location and streetscape requirements. So let's quickly take a closer look at the streets map, and then we'll focus on the 2040 policy map. Before going into detail on the map itself, it's helpful to consider what a street actually is. So a street looks, feels, and functions the way it does based on all the components within, expanding from building front to building front, as listed here on this slide. So the various components of the street, from bike and pedestrian amenities to the travel lanes, all work in concert together to serve all users. The streets map is the mapped vision of our multimodal street network. It's based on council adopted policies that have been developed and refined over the last several years. It shows the recommended cross-section for all of Charlotte's arterial streets and will support the UDO and the 2040 policy map to ensure that we're building multimodal streets as we grow and develop. So the map is in draft format. We want to remind you that you can go online to review and provide comment on the streets map through November 14th. On the online platform, you can click on a street and there will be a pop-up box that includes some information, and then you can leave a comment there. There's also a video available, and we'll put that link in the chat. That will, it has instructions for how to use that interactive map feature. So today we're going to be focusing on the 2040 policy map, but if you do have any questions or comments on the streets map or streets in general, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll collect all of those and pass them along to the streets team, who they're going to compile everything and post responses on the project website. So moving on to the 2040 policy map, this map is a companion to the comprehensive plan and provides guidance for where and how development should occur in the future. It provides comprehensive and citywide direction for how Charlotte will balance both the needs and opportunities that come with future growth. So for example, the map will ensure our city can accommodate its projected growth while also protecting features that are important to residents, such as natural environment and established neighborhoods. The mapping effort will ensure we align future growth with infrastructure capacity so we grow smartly and maximize our resources. Finally, the 2040 policy map's citywide direction means we can ensure historically underserved areas are guaranteed better access in the future, and Charlotte becomes a more equitable city. So the Charlotte 2040 policy map was developed using a new tool called place types. The place types tool was vetted by the community during the development of the comprehensive plan. This mapping process will focus on where to assign those place types throughout the community. Place types are a new classification system to organize patterns of development. They're more complete and holistic than the city's old classification system called future land use, which only provides guidance for the type of development, such as residential, commercial, or institutional uses that are permitted on a property. In comparison, place types provides guidance for the mix and proportions of land use, building form and design, mobility, and open space. The place types palette itself includes 10 different place types. Those are shown on this page, and they fall into 3 categories: live, work, and play. The place types include different scales of mixed-use activity centers. So those are the play across the bottom. We've got neighborhood, community, and regional. So those are mixed use, different uses like commercial, civic, residential, office, everything can happen in those centers. Then the workplace types, there's 4, moving up the slide. We've got commercial, campus, innovation, mixed use, and manufacturing and logistics. And then in the live category, we've got parks and preserves, and then we've got 2 scales of neighborhood. So a lower density neighborhood, which is neighborhood 1, and higher density, which is neighborhood 2. There's more information about these place types online if you want to familiarize yourself with them a bit more. So the 2040 policy map was developed using place types and followed a 3-step process. There were several data inputs used in each of the 3 mapping steps. So looking at the existing development map, this was the first map we created to understand existing land use and development on the ground today. Then there's the adopted policies map, which is the second map on the screen here. So the first major input into that one was future land use recommendations from area plans adopted since 2010. This guidance accounts for approximately 27% of our land area. And then for that second map, the remaining portions of the city were informed by zoning or existing entitlements of a property. In instances where the existing zoning district didn't clearly translate one-to-one to a place type, we used a market analysis to help identify what was the most realistic future use of a property. And then the 2040 policy map, the one that says CLT future policies on this slide, the major inputs used in that one, it started by revising the adopted policies map, the second map, and really applying the comprehensive plan policies to that map. So the equitable growth framework and the preservation policies from the comprehensive plan were the primary policies that were included on this map. And then the draft recommendations were checked against several other data sources, such as growth projections, environment and infrastructure capacity, and market realities. So right now we're doing all these phase 2 community conversations. They're organized around 15 community planning areas across the city. So today's meeting is about the Southwest Middle Community Planning Area. So this area is bounded mostly by I-485 and I-77. And then we've got Billy Graham Parkway on the north side there. The other thing I'll point out is we have the Blue Line corridor, and that goes parallel to South Boulevard, just east outside of this community planning area. So now we'll zoom in on the mapping in this area. So as I mentioned, the mapping approach began by translating what's on the ground today, and then what future place types would look like without the comprehensive plan policies. So the first step in developing the draft 2040 policy map was to translate what's on the ground today into the place types tool. This translation was based on existing land use data and development patterns. So you can see in this community planning area, we've got some dark gray, which is a vacant it's not actually one of our place types in a forward-looking sense. It just is describing vacant and undeveloped land today. We've got some light yellow neighborhood 1 mixed throughout. The purple is manufacturing and logistics, so more of an industrial place type. The teal color is campus, so that can be community uses, schools, churches. It can also be more of like an office campus or a medical campus or an educational campus. And then we've got parks and preserves in green and some commercial in red along some of those more major corridors. So again, this is for reference for what's on the ground today through the lens of this place type tool. So this next map is the adopted policies map. So it's the second step in the mapping approach. Again, this map was used to translate the city's adopted policies and existing entitlements into place types. So it was based on future land use and zoning outside of the policies that are in the new comprehensive plan. So you can see, and I'll flip back and forth one more time, I think that's helpful. You can see how existing development shown here changes in looking at this adopted policy map. And that change is outlined on the right side of the slide here in these percentages. So you'll see a lot of the parks and preserves disappearing, and that's likely based on what the actual zoning is in those areas. It may not be zoned for parks, so that's something that we looked at in our next mapping step. There's also less commercial and less campus. I think the campus largely gets absorbed into neighborhoods or converted into more mixed use activity centers, like a community activity center we're seeing in blue. And then we actually gain a good amount of neighborhood 1 place type. And I think that's for a few different reasons, but one part is that some of those parks and preserve areas may have actually been zoned for low density residential, and in theory could develop if they're not further protected. So now the maps we're going to be looking at from here onwards are going to be the 2040 policy map. So the third step in the mapping process. We built upon that past map, the adopted policies map, so it reflects the priorities of the comprehensive plan. The first policy applied in this step of the process was to preserve or protect what was identified in the plan as community assets. So the comprehensive plan includes policies to preserve existing neighborhood 1, parks and preserves, and manufacturing and logistics. These were identified as community assets in the plan development process. So you can see those 3 place types shown on the map here in yellow, purple, and green. So in some areas, these place types were already preserved based on adopted policies. The areas highlighted in blue show additional areas where these place types were preserved as part of this 2040 policy mapping step. You can see % change in these place type assignments on the right side of the slide. So now we're looking at the change from that second map. Basically, the direction Charlotte was headed without the comprehensive plan, and now we've applied comprehensive plan policies, and this is the difference there. So we gained back pretty much all of those parks and preserves that were lost, and we also are preserving some existing areas of neighborhood 1 despite losing some new areas of neighborhood 1, because instead we're preserving parks and preserves in those locations. So the next priority from the comprehensive plan that was incorporated into the mapping process was to improve access to jobs, housing, and goods and services in underserved areas. So improving access to these 3 necessities is a hallmark of the 2040 comprehensive plan, and it's outlined within the equitable growth framework within the plan. So first we'll take a look at how this effort attempted to improve access to housing opportunity in this area. So on this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are currently lacking access to housing diversity. So meaning you can't easily find a variety of housing types in these areas. Diverse housing types are important for providing a range of housing prices and lifestyle choices for different members of our community. So the bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access to housing is currently lacking as part of the comprehensive plan. However, from a mapping approach, the place type tool can only really address housing unit diversity. So that was the focus for this step. Neighborhood 2, shown in orange on this map, is a place type that helps provide more housing opportunities. It allows a wider range of building types from quadruplexes and townhomes to apartments. So finding opportunities to allow neighborhood 2 in this area, we think more housing choices will be constructed in this area in the future. So in some areas, neighborhood 2 is already mapped based on the adopted policies map. The areas highlighted in blue show additional areas where neighborhood 2 is recommended as part of this mapping step. So we've got some big areas of orange that are highlighted in blue. So those are helping to fill that housing diversity or housing opportunity gap. And I believe those were mostly areas that are vacant on the existing development map. So proposing that those go with a higher density of housing. And then this is just a clean version with the first 4 place types on the 2040 policy map. So the next component of the equitable growth framework, or the EGF as we call it, is improving access to employment opportunity. So on this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are lacking existing access to employment opportunity, meaning there aren't a lot of jobs in this area. Again, the bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access to employment is currently lacking. The place type mapping focused on providing opportunities for employment within a commute shed, so about 1.5 miles of every neighborhood, but not necessarily within every neighborhood. So campus and innovation mixed use are 2 of the work category place types, and those can help provide more employment opportunities within close proximity to neighborhoods. So by finding opportunities to allow more of these 2 place types in this area, we'll create more employment opportunities in the future. So here you can see in teal and light pink where these 2 place types are mapped. There's actually none of the light pink on this map in this area. So there were limited opportunities to map additional or any innovation mixed use in this part of the city, but there is some campus mapped mostly on the south side of the community planning area and up a bit on the northeast. So with that, I'll also mention that some of our other place types do help increase access to employment. So those place types are manufacturing logistics, which you can see on the map in purple. And then on the next upcoming slides, we'll look at some of the activity centers, which can also provide more diverse employment opportunities. So here's just a clean version of the map with those first 6 place types. So next, we're going to look at mapping of access to essential amenities, goods, and services policies. This is the 3rd component of the equitable growth framework. On this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are lacking existing access to essential amenities, goods, and services. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where access is currently lacking. The underlying metrics were specifically identified as items place type mapping could help address. So the other items can really happen with any place type. So we would look towards other tools to help fill those gaps. So commercial and activity centers are place types that can help provide more access to amenities. Here you can see in red and blue, and I think the other 2 are not on the map, but we've mostly got commercial and community activity center in this community planning area. So it shows neighborhood center going down and basically disappearing off the map. And I believe that's because it was elevated to a community activity center. So still providing that access to essential amenities. And here we've got the complete 2040 policy map with all 10 place types shown. So we'll leave that up just for a second if anyone wants to get a good look. So there is one last component of the equitable growth framework. This one's environmental justice. So lastly, on this map, areas outside the black diagonal hatches are impacted by environmental justice issues. The bullet points on this page are the metrics that were used to understand where environmental justice is currently lacking. The place type mapping effort used buffering and transitions to reduce the proximity between neighborhoods and heavy industrial uses or major transportation infrastructure as much as possible. We also did not map new, more intense place types in the floodplain. So ultimately, opportunities to provide that buffering or transition was limited based on existing development. So again, we'd be looking at other tools outside of place types to help further address these inequities. So those tools might be things like programming, design solutions, infrastructure projects, that sort of thing. Okay, so that concludes the last step in the current mapping approach. I mentioned earlier that we'd like to get your opinion on whether or not you think these steps align with the values and priorities of the comprehensive plan. So we have a few polling questions for you now. So I can just read through and explain them real quick, and then we can launch them all. So the first question is about preserving neighborhood 1 and parks and preserves in particular. So our question is, do you agree or not with this statement? The mapping step to preserve neighborhood 1 parks and preserves aligns with Charlotte's comprehensive plan direction to protect community assets. Then we're asking about improving access to housing diversity and whether you agree that mapping more neighborhood 2 can help increase access to housing diversity. Looking at access to jobs, we're wondering if you agree that campus and innovation mixed use can help increase job access in the future. And again, I'll point out that this is a citywide mapping effort. So although there may have been limited opportunities to fill some of these gaps in this particular area, we're asking generally, do you agree with the mapping approach as a citywide methodology? So access to goods and services, we're asking you if you agree that mapping activity centers in areas with low access is a good approach to increasing that access. And then lastly, we want to know how important is it to you to explore additional tools to further mitigate environmental justice impacts during the upcoming community area planning process. So that'll be a more detailed, zoomed in planning effort that will follow this effort. So we'll give it a few seconds for each poll, and then we will go on to the next ones. I know we have a small group today with a few staff members on the line, but so you can keep going. Looks like neutral was generally the response for the protection policies. And if anyone has thoughts or comments on these, feel free to speak up or put them in the chat as well. Okay, I think we'll just keep moving through these since there's not too many responses coming in. Okay, so next we want to highlight what the above previously mentioned place type recommendations mean for this area in terms of attracting new housing units and future jobs. In terms of housing units, the place type recommendations within this geography will attract 6,500 new housing units. This number of housing units is about 4% of all new units projected for the city by 2040. So I would say that's probably roughly proportional to the size of this area. In terms of new jobs, the place type recommendations within this geography will attract over 4,500 new jobs. This number of jobs is about 2% of all new jobs projected for the city by 2040. Okay, so now that we've walked through the draft 2040 policy map recommendations for this area, we'd like to get your feedback on how to improve the draft mapping approach. Again, the objective of this conversation is to collect feedback both on the current steps in the mapping approach as well as the potential revisions to the approach. So there's two types of feedback that we can really use to revise the mapping approach. First, we can identify additional steps to add to it, which would help better align the final map with the comprehensive plan. And then we can discuss potential adjustments to the current mapping steps that would help improve the accuracy. Okay, so we've got a few questions here. We just lost someone, so our group has gotten even smaller. But we can just step through these, and I think we can skip the polling. But David, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this area in particular, if you'd like to go through these, or if you prefer to just look at the map and discuss that, or maybe you don't have any other questions or comments.
I'm confused about the area south of the airport.
Sure. So why don't we skip ahead and just look at the map? Okay.
So the area south of the airport is being purchased and bought up by the airport and rezoned for industrial, and they're selling the property to people to use for industrial purposes. So it's puzzling why it's neighborhood 1, because nobody wants to live there because of the airport noise, and people are moving out, and the airport is buying people out because of the airport noise. So it's just a puzzle.
No, that's helpful information. So this this map reflects recent rezonings as recent as April, based on like the timeline of this effort. So we're hoping to update one more time before we have the next draft of the map by next January. So hoping to get all that data pulled through. But that's helpful and updated information for us to consider. So I think it's probably based neighborhood 1 because that's what's there right now. And one of the comprehensive plan policies is to preserve existing neighborhood 1 as much as possible. So sounds like that type of rezoning of neighborhood 1 is something that we can actually look at citywide.
There's another major development just to south of that. There's an area, the larger area on the map that's identified as neighborhood 2, that has been rezoned also and will have a residential component, but it is going to be mostly industrial as well, industrial and offices. It just seems to be inconsistent with what's actually happening.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that mixture of uses to me sounds more like the innovation mixed use place type, which can have some smaller footprint industrial uses and some larger footprint, but it has more of a mix with residential and retail rather than just being solely industrial uses like the manufacturing and logistics place type generally is. That purple manufacturing and logistics does recommend some supportive uses are mixed within, but sounds like taking a closer look at where innovation mixed use might be appropriate would be kind of that category for that area.
So something that's just generally accepted that area the area south of the airport is converting to industrial primarily because of airport noise, and people don't want to live there, and the airport's buying people out. So new residential development is the likelihood of new residential development in that big clump of yellow is practically zero.
Interesting. Yeah, and the environmental justice component of the equitable growth framework does look at proximity to major transportation infrastructure. So I think we could take a closer look at the airport in particular as infrastructure that would have an impact on local nearby neighborhoods. So
Well, if you're looking at access to transportation opportunities, it's not really applicable what the situation is. It's airplane noise is driving people out.
sure, yeah. So we're looking at infrastructure as it relates to air quality, noise pollution, that sort of thing. Not necessarily direct access to the airport, but more so the impacts of living near the airport. So I think that's right in line with those policies. It's something to further consider. Any other thoughts or comments on the map that you want to provide?
Not right now.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for coming. I think the rest of us are staff, so I think we'll probably just wrap up early, but I know you've attended a few of these, so appreciate your participation. And there's also the online map too, if you wanted to give any specific comments outside of what we've captured today. So
I'm with the Steel Creek Residents Association. So this area that we look at includes most of this area.
right, yeah, it spills over into this community planning area and farther south and west. Yeah, I saw that one on the map. So awesome, cool. Well, thanks again for coming. Appreciate your feedback.
Okay.
All right, have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.